Hi, my name is Asako Musikare and I am your host for the Let's Talk Energy podcast presented by Amila Africa. We are live at Africa Energy Week 2025 and we are here to have more engagements on how it is that we can shape the future of energy on the continent. Today I have with me Mr. Antony Ellis, who is the Director of Commercial in Century Group, and he's going to just talk us through what it is that they do at Century Group. They are an energy investment, de-risking and infrastructure company that has quite a broad footprint on a global scale that he can really get into with us as we keep speaking. But in terms of work that Antony has done, he has a broad span in the commercial space, spanning 35 years across a variety of continents and industry sectors. And his footprint across the globe is continental, predominantly the Middle East, Africa, Europe, and most recently the Caribbean. I think we'll speak more into that. He's focused on negotiations and supply chains and has run some of the most complex supply chains in the world, one of the key ones being for the Shell company. Thank you so much for joining us today, Antony. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Absolutely live, this again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me.
I think we can just really get into how you found yourself in the sector and what the pivot leading from being with a company like Shell and then joining a company like Century Group has been like.
Okay, well, thank you. Obviously, working for an international oil company like Shell gives you an absolutely base foundation on all the principles, the way we work, and the oil and gas industry at all. However, I think the most important thing with Shell differently was the cultural experience. Whether it was the Middle East, the Far East, Asia, Africa, or the Caribbean. And I think there's a lot of effort Shell brings together around focusing on local content. So when I retired from Shell 2 years ago and joined Century Group as the commercial director, Nigeria for me is home. It's a fantastic nation, lots of potential, and it's an easy place for me to work. I feel very at home. But I also think the last 7 years at Shell gave me an intimate understanding of the complexity of the supply chain and the opportunities in a country like Nigeria, and Century Group now in terms of our investments and how we're then transporting that out to the Caribbean and working in Guyana and Suriname. But I must bring that all back to the foundation Shell gave me of 25 years.
And I like that you speak on the fact that there's such an intercontinental link that you have in the way that you've been trading and being in the commercial sector. Something that I'm very curious about is how is it that you see an interlink, and how is it that you would describe the commercial energy sector? I think a lot of the time people look at energy at a non-commercial sector and on a non-commercial front, but how is it that you would describe the sector in particular and how it is that you are contributing in your role at Century Group right now?
So the Century Group, we're investing in infrastructure. So you have three of our own FPSOs, FSOs, and flow stations. Now, with all of that comes the complexity of the trading, the dealing, and so on at the top end, which is the big oil and gas stuff. And then day to day, is how do you make those organizations profitable? If you've listened to some of the presentations today by some of the keynote speakers, Tony Atta of Renaissance, the newly merged Made in Africa energy company, what you see is there's all around cost and maximizing cost benefit, ensuring that we're paying the right price for the right activity with the right people. Africa has an abundance by people. It doesn't have enough of its own local content and its own manufacturing to cost. The other things that hold us back a lot are access to energy and access to power. Industrialization, manufacturing is a key part of any nation's growth. And if you look Pan-Africa, and some of the keynote speakers have said in the last 2 days, that limiting access to power, clean energy, was not only debilitating for the population, it's debilitating for industry. So the role of energy, the role of a company like Century Group, is to help industrialize and bring that power and capacity to the nation in a clean, efficient, and a cost-effective fashion.
And where are some of the key demographics that right now are a core focus in terms of capacitating? I think some of the one thing that we have realized is a trend on the continent is inconclusive projects, right? Or projects that necessarily don't have an end to them and don't have reward that's achieved in the end. So how is it that you are going to retain and also sustain the outcomes that you have created goals for?
So if you look at our investment portfolio at the moment, as I say, we've got three FPSOs. One of them is in the middle of a project.
Yeah.
So we are investing heavily in creating the other infrastructure.
Okay.
But as CEO, Ken Tete, one of the key drivers to Kibo's is also, those are physical assets, those are steel assets. His big drive is also about growing the population and growing the skill set in the population. So we've recently conducted in Guyana one of the first series of FPSO that's placing production and storage offloading vessels, one of our platforms. We did some training in Guyana, some young students. We took 150 young students that went through some very, very basic training. On our next stage is to bring a number of those students from Guyana to Nigeria and train them on our own FPSO assets. So yes, we can get the infrastructure built, we can get the infrastructure operating. Yet those projects, the lifespan of those projects is driven by people. And the capacity of the organization, the people, to bring that to life is critical for us at Century.
And as Century Group, what are your values on training and education? I'm just curious because what you've said now seems that the core of it is also skills development. How it is that your focus and some of your pillars perhaps are in support of what those KPIs that you want to reach as a company look like.
Yeah, so, I think you've heard it here from a lot of the participants. People are the background, the backbone, every organization. We talked about projects. We develop our own project engineers. We, of course, buy in other resource and other contractors support us, but we must have that key resource in-house to drive our projects, uncompeted projects. So from our own point of view, we're turnkey. We can go to end-to-end. Yes, we bring experts in for certain types of very critical project experience. But for us, we want to keep a lot of that capacity in-house and then develop the next generation of engineers, commercial leaders, and so on.
Okay, so that is something that is part of your operational ecosystem.
It's part of our DNA. If you speak to Ken Tete, he believes in the growth of the individual, helping the individual to grow and aspire. Look around some of the young talents of their organization. You see them just going from step to step to step all the way through. And he also takes risks, and that's what I like. When you see someone pushed beyond what they thought they could achieve on their own, and it gets support from an organization like Century, it's absolutely outstanding. Absolutely. And that's why we've been able to invest in Guyana. Our Ghana business there, run by our MD, Sheldon Davis, is going from strength to strength. Started small and growing all the time. So it's a delight to be able to move and transition from Africa into the Caribbean and then support those growing nations. Guyana, 800,000 people. It doesn't have enough capacity, human capacity that is, to grow for its facing. So one of our opportunities is to take the capacity from Africa, Nigeria specifically for us, and export it into Guyana to help the growth for Bayu.
And see. And you speak about the work that you do in the Caribbean. I'd like to tap into how it is that there's synergy and possibly what similarities, because of the exposure that you have. They're both black markets. And they're both, apart from them being black markets, and when I say black market, I mean predominantly in terms of Switzerland and the people that you would be supplying the energy to is predominantly that. So it's different continents, it's different demographics, it's different cultures. But what are some of the similarities that you have identified for you guys to be able, for Century Group to be able to say, this is a state that we feel that there needs to be investments in? I'm curious what the similarities are because of developments. And I think that it would be great for our audience to get a bit more insight because there's especially now with the diaspora, there's such an interconnectedness and all of that. And I think there's no one perfect to speak to other than you about that.
I think fundamentally, you look at the similar in so many ways. First of all, it's another market development. And one thing about the oil sector, but let's be clear, it's just generally the same technology applied in different locations. There's nothing new. Drill a well, some are deeper, some are more complex, some are more higher temperatures, higher pressures, but it's the same system. The onshore production, the offshore production, it's very familiar to everybody who's been around. Again, that comes back to the core experience the Century have. They understand this. So we are able to move from market to market, primarily because but then, as you say, that deep cultural roots, having grown up I've been down in Africa for almost 12 years. Worked here, lived here in Africa, primarily in Nigeria, and then trying to translate that cultural understanding into an area like Guyana. It, having that familiarity and being in Nigeria for this period, it makes it easy.
Yeah.
Having said that, Guyana and Nigeria are incredibly different peoples. Indo-Guyanese, African Guyanese, Africa. So you get some very different nuances. So I think one must be very careful assuming was the same, but as you said, is saying indigenous type population, but it's not. It's very, very different. So technology-wise, not a big difference. We learn from living and working in Africa. It's all the non-technical is political is how we manufacture, work, live with these stakeholders. That's from the government down, the local diaspora, and so on. So managing that was, I think, the key advantages that we have coming from, let's be honest, the complexities of a country like Nigeria.
Absolutely. And how do you maneuver some of the limitations that come with the commercial business being able to trade in a country, not being able to trade, being able to function and operate and have a good and sustainable business, not just in terms of, I think more than anything, and we're always careful around the matter, especially on platforms like podcasts, the corruption is a real thing when it comes to doing business and being able to facilitate or aid development. So how is it that Century Group also works and makes sure that they are inclusive to policymakers, that they are accountable to governance as well as civil society? How do you guys streamline all of those stakeholders in order to make sure that you have the most conducive working environments and also that you can achieve all of your business's goals, such as training, such as educating, and such as trading at the end of the day?
You touched on very good points. My fundamental belief is that what we do is, as I told you, it's not complex. Has risks, high risk. We've seen that in the Gulf of Mexico. We tried to do with BP. We even have risk day-to-day in our own business. And managing that piece, keeping people safe is push.
Absolutely.
Demonstrating that you can deliver, and you said it all, end-to-end preach. Demonstrating that you have assets and develop assets, bring them on faster, at a more competitive price than others, and deliver it safely is the key, and that's what Central Group's be able to do. In regards to how you walk those corridors of power and keep everybody balanced, I mean, no works.
Yeah, absolutely.
No really works. And I remember when I first started in Nigeria, I made it very clear that I work inside Shell. Shell teaches you certain principles.
Yeah.
And we're guided by certain practices,
Absolutely.
Shell demonstrators and ethics.
Yes.
And yours is,
Yeah.
it's a really easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And, I think I pride myself, but the value I brought, I added value to the local content in Nigeria by being professional. Never asking for anything and never accepting anything. I was lucky enough to be appreciated. I achieved, or given recognition for an award for excellence in local content.
Wow.
Because I was able to help local companies, I'm talking like big companies,
Yeah.
do the right thing.
Absolutely.
The biggest challenge that I think the industry faces is where there are briefcase companies who had no van. Those are things, and we've heard from NNPC and Executive Secretary of NCBNB in Nigeria, where those briefcase companies to go. But adding no value, just leech you.
Yeah.
Century Group has invested multiple tens of millions in our assets, our people, and our equipment. And I think just by that, it defines you as a different organization. I don't think you can operate in the market and not be invested. If you want to sit there and only be blunt and say it, skim,
Yeah.
that's not the sort of company we want to work with. It's not the sort of company how we represent ourselves.
Absolutely.
So invest in people, invest in infrastructure, and we'll get to most possible.
I think that that's remarkable, and there's so much that we can take away from that. We definitely need to have you back next year on this podcast because I think that there's so much that you can really, really unpack and really, really sort of solidify if there's any doubts for people who had not practiced in the spaces that you practice, that the assumptions and the common sense solutions that we have are actually genuinely some of the genuine practices that need to be put in place. But I also think what is so important that you've touched on is that no, when it comes to business, integrity is a center of it, and so are ethics. So I think that that's something that definitely stands out in what you do as a company and how it is that you guys grow, not only as an individual who is in an exco, environment, but I think also as a company. And what I want to ask in conclusion is how your experience of this year's Energy Week has been and what it is that you think Century Group is going to walk out of from this year moving into next year and preparing to be here for the 2026 edition of Africa Energy Week.
Yeah, so my first experience of Africa Energy Week was many, many years ago. I can't remember whether it was when I was in Shell or after I left Shell. But I've seen the show grow, and it's just going from strength to strength. I think the content itself, you can get really technical here, or you can get, it varies from top to bottom. There's a lot of really good work here. I'm not talking technical in terms of technical expertise. We're talking technical at an industry global now. From Century Group's point of view, we've been here consistently. I think you see from the stand today, we've made a step up in our investment. We like being a partner to the show. I believe our CEO will tell me later we'll still be part of the show next year.
Absolutely.
What I would like to see more of, I'd like to see, what goes from year to year. And I think we should reflect on what's been achieved in the prior year and say, what the promises that were made, did they come through? Yeah. Because I think only then will people see the true value. And I think as somebody opening address today, so power, access to power, clean energy for Africa's nations. I mean, I think after Energy Week is all about that. And if we can all be part of that, and add to that, well, fantastic.
I agree. And thank you so much for me.
And I have to say one more thing.
Yes.
That you've just had your young first child, I believe.
Yes, I have.
And imagine the clean energy, access to energy, power for your son in its future years.
Absolutely. My son, my entire lifeline, my bloodline, sorry, not my lifeline, but I definitely agree. And thank you for making me blush in front of the camera. Thank you so much. I think that this has been very insightful. We appreciate the commercial points of view that you've brought to the conversation. And like I said, we really want to dive so much deeper into it next year, because I think that this episode will definitely plant the seed of helping people to understand on a more commercial front. I was just speaking to somebody not too long ago about batteries, and how batteries, and how we overlook small sources of energy and the role that they play in the overall functionality of our society. So I think that there's so much more that I definitely want to tap into with you, for us to give people a better understanding of the different, subcategories and categories of energy and what that means. So thank you so much, Anthony, for the time. Thank you for the work that you do through Century Group, and we look forward to seeing you next year.
Absolutely.
Sure. Thank you so much. Bye.